All right, everybody. This is Shenga. Another beautiful day or night, I should say. So this is SG2 on Space, episode number 19. And as you know, SG2 on Space is the only weekly space radio show in Houston and possibly the entirety of Texas. So thank you, all of you listeners. And speaking of listeners, I'm sure you're either listening to us on weareA1.com. That's WEAREA, the number one.com, or Facebook.com/Action One Media, which is this company. As you can see, Action One Media here. Or Facebook.com/The Shen Show, THESHENSHOW, since that was a former name of the show. So, any case, last week. Oh, one more thing. Please feel free to support me at patreon.com, patreon.com/SG2. All right, so that's SG and then the number 2. So that would be wonderful. Everybody could use your support. So with that, let me just make a mention that last week I attended the 2019 NASA Human Research Program Investigators Workshop, which is quite a long name, and they do it every year. So what is this? This was basically a week-long conference from January 22nd through the 25th for NASA-funded investigators in Galveston, Texas, which is next to the ocean, which was nice. And specifically focused on human research, right? So it covers stuff like medical capability, human factors, behavior performance, human health countermeasures such as artificial gravity or radiation, so mostly a lot of microgravity, right? Effects, and ISS medical projects as well as space radiation. So aside from going there to talk with ASTRAD folks, a radiation vest project done by STEMRAD, an Israeli company in Lockheed Martin, which I am involved with. I met some very interesting people. Last week, as you may recall, I interviewed Irene Brinker, who was the founder of Diwali, who did a medical device company, ideally, that could be used in space. This week, I am interviewing a fellow by the name of Neil Banerjee, whom I met at one of the poster sessions on Thursday, and essentially he had a very interesting presentation. Now, I'm not going to go so much into his current research, except to say that he's doing some very interesting things in terms of virtual reality at the University of Colorado Boulder right now, and he's been there since July of 2018. So it's only been a few months, and he's already going around, presenting his research, which is pretty cool. So, any case, previously, Neil has also worked at Air Force Research Laboratories, Hyperloop Transportation Technologies, and he attended USC as well, in particular USC School of Cinematic Arts, which is, quite a different thing than the technical aspect, right? So, any case, so at the USC School of Cinematic Arts, he was a student of computational neuroscience, and USC, by the way, stands for University of Southern California. And he also has, back then, he was pursuing a bachelor's in Neurocinematics, as you can see the bio here, actually. And he's done stuff on VR experience for patients with dementia, caretakers, investigating neurocorrelates of immersion through fMRI analysis. So that's a lot of medical aspects, right, and virtual reality. But he's also engaged in aerospace projects for both academia and industry. And that's definitely an aspect which this show is very interested in, on how his diverse experiences have enabled, furthering his work in the space industry, or, at least ideally in the future. So, in any case, so that is with that. Um, so let us. Want to bring him on? Hi, Neil.
Hey, hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. It's a little fuzzy, but I think it'll do.
Okay, wonderful. All right, I hope you heard my attempt at your intro. So,
Yeah.
all right. So let's go back from the beginning then. So how did you since this is a space show, and I understand currently you're doing a master's degree in aerospace engineering, whereas your previous experiences seem to be quite a lot of different aspects. How did you get yourself into your current space endeavors, and where did this come from?
Yeah, so I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama, and then I actually moved to Dayton, Ohio, and then for college I moved to Los Angeles. So these are three like really, really big aerospace centers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I kind of like kept my interest alive over the course of my academic career. So like since like I was really young, I was around a lot of like space technology and things of that sort. But the thing that I was really interested in high school and stuff like that was more of the biological side of things. So I went with that for
Mm-hmm.
my undergrad. I went for computational neuroscience, and since it was at USC, I was really interested in taking advantage of their film school, which is like really top notch, and kind of investigating how neuroscience interfaces with these immersive technologies that are like really booming right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then also over the course of this time, like I was taking internships in aerospace. So I worked at Air Force Research Labs because that was like a really good research opportunity for high school students in the Dayton area. And in college, I worked for Hyperloop Transportation Technologies. So it's like very aerospace related. So professionally, I was kind of aerospace oriented, and in like school, I was pretty neuroscience oriented. And so then I found out about the Colorado University bioastronautics program, and it was
Mm-hmm.
like kind of the perfect mix of all of that. So I tried my absolute best to apply and get in there, and it's actually the only graduate school that I was accepted to. So everything
Mm-hmm.
worked out perfectly, and now I'm there. So that's kind of the abridged background of how I got here.
That is definitely quite a story. I mean, you've mentioned a number of things which the typical aerospace person wouldn't have experienced. So, okay, but I understand that through your from your very early childhood growing up in Huntsville, there was the interest in space that was instilled in you. Was there a defining moment, or was it more of a gradual process?
Yeah, so like it's kind of interesting. I think I have this kind of belief that like space is intrinsically interesting, and like everybody finds it somewhat wondrous and like a source of curiosity and things like that. But that could obviously be like me imposing my own interests onto other people.
I
But
feel the same way,
I
but
think
go on.
I think that like there was a very defining moment where it was totally by happenstance. I was at a friend's house, and this was a family friend who just happened to be like they were family friends with this astronaut named Mike Fink.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike Fink, at the time, I was probably 4 years old. He was the commander of the International Space Station. And so one time when I was over at these people's house, Mike
Wow.
Fink called their house from the International Space Station, and I was there. And like since I was there, I got to talk to him on the phone, and it was such like a surreal experience. Like I definitely didn't understand the weight of the situation at
Mm-hmm.
that age, but I think that it was a really good thing to have happen to me and stay attached to, as I did learn more about space and about how like our world works. And as I progressed through my education, that was like a really cool anchor point to have in my past.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's quite a story as well. I haven't experienced that myself, and yet you experienced it when you were you said 4 years old, right? Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. So at some point though, okay. We gotta take a short little break, but we'll come back, and I would love to talk to you about your work at USC, particularly in your neurocinematics / neuroscience stuff. So let's take a break, and then we'll jump back on that.
Sure.
Action 1, doing it for the culture.
When the 7 trumpets sound, we gon' start the revolution. When we turn up, we shut it down. We are skywalkers. This feels of my Kabbalah, illuminated properly in sight. Shows the man in universe and the creator's gift of life. When the earth collides with every piece of star from afar, there's a higher probability to find out where we are. Trapped in time and space, lost in this dimension. 7 sins committed daily. Never did I fail to mention this the rapture. I capture every piece of star power with this mic to evolve and conquer all collapse and darkness with this light. I bear to witness any slightest hint of change in this existence, being reminiscent of the first age. Awake, aware and conscious of your own nature, to rise within the system and align with your creator's vision. Man on the
Everybody say, get in the action!
Get in the action!
What he dabbing on him, okay.
Get in the action.
Yo, we in here dabbing on the real. Y'all stay tuned, more to come. Action 1 Media Group. It's time to get into action, man. For real.
In your face.
All right, and we're back. You're listening to SG2 on Space. Your host is me, Shen Ge, S-H-E-N, last name G-E, on the platform Action 1 Media. And this is the only weekly space show here in Houston, Texas, episode number 19. So today I'm interviewing Neil Banerjee, spelled N-E-I-L, last name B-A-N-E-R-J-E-E, whom I met at the 2019 NASA Human Research Program on January 24th, 2019. And he is currently a student, a master's student at the University of Colorado, Boulder, studying aerospace engineering. And before we went on break, I was asking him about how he got into space, the interest in there, as well as his previous background leading him to this point. So going into a little more detail here. So Neil, I understand at University of Southern California, you study computational neuroscience / neurocinematics. Can you describe a little bit about what exactly that is? Since I don't think, I'm not sure, I mean, neurocinematics at least, I'm not sure what that is.
Sure, yeah. So it's actually funny that you say that, because it's a bit of like a made-up term, but it is kind of generally accepted now in this very specific community of neuroscience research. So basically, I went into the USC, and I was in regular neuroscience, and I was thinking about like kind of my future job prospects and things like that, as one does. And I was thinking about having a little bit more of a transferable skill set. So I switched into computational neuroscience, which is basically a 50-50 mix of computer science and neuroscience. So that allowed me to pick up those CS skills that I think would be really useful in the future. And that has like happened to be the case, thankfully. But while I was there, like I had kind of alluded to earlier, I got really interested in virtual reality and augmented reality and all these new forms of immersive media that have just like kind of come to the forefront and were really being pushed out in the form of like commercial products. And so like the general public was also now like really interested in these things. So USC has a really good program in their cinema school. It's called Media Arts and Practice, and that really focuses on their forward-facing technologies such as VR and AR. So I was really like kind of searching for ways to combine these two fields that I found very interesting, and not just combine them like randomly, but in a sort of meaningful way. So I ended up finding a professor at the Salk Institute of Biological Studies in San Diego. His name is Sergey Gepstein, and he's a perception scientist. So he uses VR and actually characterizes VR through the lens of perceptual neuroscience. And there's like a lot of interesting things that you can measure in VR that are not necessarily analogous in the physical 3D world. So I did some research at USC about how to quantify those boundaries of visibility that exist in both VR and physical space, but they are slightly different in each case. So in short, like neurocinematics is how you kind of blend like like this field of immersive media and perceptual neuroscience. Okay. And I was kind of like leveraging my background in neuroscience and computer programming and the resources at University of Southern California to kind of make that a reality. So like previously, only like this term had been coined in like a couple papers by like a few researchers, but like to formalize that was like kind of my goal. And now there's this thing at USC called the USC Space Center, which is ironically nothing to do with outer space, but it's the Spatial Perception and Concrete Experience Lab. So that's kind of like my research was a seminal experiment for that center. And like they continue to do research at this intersection of neuroscience and immersive media. And actually that professor has been brought on to the USC faculty now to pursue similar types of research.
Let me ask you this. So I just looked up on Wikipedia, and tell me if this definition is correct. So it says neurocinematics is how watching movies or particular scenes from movies affect our brains and the response the human brain gives to any given movie or scene. The term neurocinema.
Right, so
okay.
Yeah, so that is like the kind of original definition that was put forth by this researcher named Yuri Hassan. And we kind of took it and ran with it a little bit to expand that to include other forms of immersive media, not just movies, but like kind of accommodating the future. So saying like, how can any kind of immersive media affect how people's like collective experience or shared experience, or how can it affect people's experience, like as opposed to like experiencing things in real life.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I understand. So it basically deals with your perceptions and how that influences your brain.
Yeah.
So if I'm putting it from a very high level. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So and while you were doing this program, were you conducting any particular research?
Yeah, so my undergraduate thesis was kind of centered on these boundaries of visibility that I was talking about earlier. So if you we ran a human subject experiment where you get people to do this thing called a binary discrimination task. So they will tell you whether this like pattern on the screen is moving to the right or to the left. And if you really can't tell and you do a bunch of trials, you should get a 50%,
right? Which
is representative of just guessing straight up and having no idea. You're not aided by your perception at all. On the other end of the spectrum, if you get 100%, that means that like the pattern that you are seeing is like clearly visible and within your realm of visibility. So we vary a bunch of different variables and we test them on people and do a bunch of trials like that and see like how they perform as you change only one of those independent variables at a time. So for example, one of the independent variables is the speed at which that pattern moves across your field of view. So if it's moving really fast, you might not be able to discern whether it's going to the right or to the left. And like we're trying to figure out on that variable, where are the boundaries where you can discern that and where you can't. And you measure that with something called a psychometric function, which is like, it's basically shaped like an S curve. So you're at the left side of it, you might have it at 50%, and at the complete right side of it, you might have it at 100% accuracy. And so where you have this kind of inflection point in the middle, we determine that to be your boundary of visibility along that axis.
That's pretty interesting. So these test subjects, you just took it from the broad population at large?
Yeah, so this is just like a random sample of people. Well, I guess you could call it a convenience sample, technically.
Right. So what were some of the key highlights that your group uncovered?
Yeah, so I think it's hard to draw like a very easy, like plain English explanation that is concise. But basically what we get out of this research is along several independent variables, we can tell you like the boundaries of visibility. And these are boundaries that have not been classified before in VR.
Right.
But they have been classified in analogous experiments in regular real life environments. So the like real novelty of it comes in teasing out the differences between those VR environments and the physical reality environments. And then from there, you can make abstractions and kind of write these like rules of thumb about how to create content in VR. So like if you know your boundaries of visibility are such that like, okay, things can only go this fast and like, you know, it can only be this distance away and like all the combinations in between, then you can inform content makers on what is conducive for viewing in virtual reality. Whereas like, you know, if you hadn't done that research, people might take it for granted that everything that you see comfortably in the physical world like translates directly into VR, but that's definitely not the case.
Okay, I see. Wow, that's pretty interesting. Okay, so moving on from this particular topic, so it looks like you've done quite a lot of various kinds of research. So I understand you did some stuff at the Air Force Research Lab. What was I guess you started you did some work there, you said, when you were in high school and then later as undergrad. Am I right?
Actually, yeah, all in high school.
All in high school. Oh, wow. Okay. I think you've demonstrated way more initiative than most high schoolers, I have to say. So, well, I know this might be a little while back, but what did you do there that's of note? I understand.
So yeah, so like I think the first project I worked on there was really, really cool. And like definitely, so to your earlier point about taking the initiative, I think like there's a lot of credit has to go to this program at the Air Force Research Labs. It's called Right Scholars, and they select high school students every year to go and do like a research internship over the summer. So you get some real actual lab experience in a very like real setting. So that was a very influential program in my academic development.
Okay.
So for my first project there, and this is really cool because actually a lot of this stuff only recently came out to like the public and became kind of pop science news. But like the Air Force is really interested in hypersonics, and like coming to CU Boulder, I like have definitely seen that the interest in hypersonics is really, really, like no pun intended, booming right now. So I think that one of the main issues they were having is how do you provide power to like the onboard computers and other small electronics on this thing called a scramjet. So like scramjets are like these aircraft that can travel at like 5 times the speed of sound. And they're actually just like some really incredible technology. They kind of harness the energy from sonic booms to like further accelerate the aircraft, and it's like pretty revolutionary. But one thing that they're trying to figure out is how do we like supply power to these electronics on board, and like one way to do that is through these devices called thermoelectric generators. So thermoelectric generators convert I'm sure you're familiar with this, they convert a temperature gradient to electrical voltage. So my job there was kind of to test a lot of different configurations of these thermoelectric generators that were manufactured with different specifications, and run these like really extreme tests on them to figure out which ones performed well under these extremely high temperature environments. So basically, you're trying to get as much power out of it as possible. But I guess more technically, you're trying to get the best efficiency possible. So we spent the summer building this like giant rig from scratch. You like pulled together all of these random pipes and like made this water-cooled test bed where we put a hot plate on one side and like the cooling water on the other side. And so that's how we created like a really strong temperature gradient. And then we measured the amount of electrical voltage that was created as a result. And then from there, we could calculate the efficiency of that particular generator at those specific conditions. And then we made a bunch of plots and made a recommendation based on that as to which one of those things that we tested would work best for the like anticipated environment that this thing would be working in.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. So, and then recently, as noted, okay, so these thermoelectric generators, they are necessary for the use in scramjets that's currently under development.
Right. So this thing is like called the X-51 scramjet, and it's made in conjunction with Boeing and the U.S. Air Force. But I think you can find a lot about it online now. I saw a news article about it pretty recently.
Yeah, the Boeing X-51 Wave Rider. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So for people listening, the X-51 technology is basically an unmanned research scramjet experimental aircraft for hypersonic flight at Mach 5. So, and it's supposed to be for a Mach 5 plus missile, which could possibly enter service in the mid-2020s. So wonderful that you've worked on such interesting technology here, and starting from high school. Wow, very impressive. So now, of course, then you did a bunch of work at your first university, University of Southern California, on computational neuroscience / neurocinematics. I noticed also that you did some work, I guess, while you're going to university at Inclusive, as well as SD Global Studios and Jam City. Okay, so how are these three related, and what did you do really?
So to aerospace and neuroscience, they're very unrelated. But this is like going to USC was a good experience for me because going to school in a big city, it kind of allows you, it's a good place to go if you don't really know what you want to do. And at that time, I really didn't know what I want to do. And so the real benefit of living in Los Angeles is that every industry is within reach. So I was really interested in business and marketing at the time too. So Inclusive was an ad agency and startup incubator. And I worked there for a summer, and I learned a lot of cool things about business. I learned a lot of cool things about marketing. I ultimately didn't like go down that path, but I was like really like thrilled that I did it for a little while. It was kind of like a very stereotypical kind of LA thing that I got to experience, where my work was really at the center of like entertainment in like the entertainment capital of the world. And I think it allowed me to really take full advantage of living in LA while also picking up some really transferable skills, like how to work in a small business, and how to like basically work right under like the CEO of a company, because this was like a really small company. So I was like very involved in that person's day-to-day stuff.
Right.
So that was really cool.
What about 5D Global Studios?
So 5D Global Studios is a company that was created by my professor at the time at USC. His name is Alex McDowell.
Mm-hmm.
And he is really, really cool. So he came from England, and he is a production designer by trade. So he was actually a production designer for really big movies like Superman and like
Whoa.
I'm forgetting the name. Minority Report, I think, and Fight Club. So like
some of my favorite movies. Like, you just named it, but go on.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So he was like, he really caught my attention because he was one of the first people to express interest in this intersection of neuroscience and immersive media, because he mainly works in the VR space now.
Mm-hmm. And
he made the initial contact with Sergey, who is a researcher at the Salk Institute. So that was kind of like what brought me to that, like that lab, his lab in the first place. So I asked to work for his company because they combined these interests of mine at the time of business and virtual reality. So what they do, and the company has changed now, it's changed names, it's called Experimental Design. I'm sure you can find something about them online. But they basically take on clients who are wondering about what their future business niche will be. So this is basically a company full of like futurists, essentially, that are trying to predict like what the role of a company will be in a broad sense in maybe 10 years or like 20 years, when the whole landscape of like technology and society has potentially changed. So this is a really interesting place to work. I worked on a couple projects there, and they've worked with like really exciting people in the past. Like they work with companies like Nike and like Boeing to kind of imagine the future. And then the way that they tie VR into all of that is that the final deliverable is this like narrative that follows the lives of like everyday people in that world, and it shows you how they interact with those companies.
Wow, that is really interesting. Okay, so we could go into this, but let's talk about, okay, so the last company you were working at, that you interned at while you were going to school at USC was Jam City, and and that's completely different from the other two, right? That's
right. Yeah. So Jam City is a gaming company.
I see.
And they mainly produce mobile games, but my interest there was in the specific role of being a data scientist.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody else would take me as a data scientist because I really didn't know that much about data science at the time. But I mean, working on something in a real work capacity is the best way to learn something. So I found a company that was willing to take me as a data scientist, and that was really interesting because a lot of the things you learn in neuroscience tie into data science very well. Like a lot of the modeling they use involves neural networks, and a good understanding of computational neuroscience was actually pretty instrumental in me doing anything useful for them.
Okay, wow. So you say these three companies that you interned at, they all seem really different, but they all use, well, I guess the skill sets that you attained while going to university.
Yeah.
And they all kind of intermingle and flow between each other, I suppose. So I guess after that, was there any other internships you were doing?
While I was at USC, yeah, I was also working at Hyperloop Transportation Technologies.
That's right. So I want to ask you about let's start about, okay, so just giving everybody a quick note, Hyperloop Transportation Technologies is is basically a company that is focused on the next, also known as HTT. It's a research company that's trying to develop a transportation system based on the Hyperloop concept, which was originally envisioned by Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla and SpaceX and a number of other companies back in 2013. And this Hyperloop concept is a proposed method of passenger or freight transportation, essentially thinking of basically a long tube or system tubes through which a pod can travel in basically vacuum. The tube will be vacuum, so you will minimize the air resistance, and it can convey people or objects at really high speeds while being extremely efficient, supposedly more so than high-speed rail. So, and understandably, SpaceX team has done a few, has looked into it, and then other companies, such as the one called Hyperloop Transportation Technologies, was started back in 2013 to also develop this, and it's currently in the. Well, actually, you know what? I might as well leave the rest for you to explain. But we need to take a little short break. All right, we'll be back, and then you can tell us about your work at Hyperloop and and what's going on over there. So
Cool.
There's a formula. If you follow the formula, you will be successful.
Facts.
You will make it. There's no way that you won't. So I was like, I'm going to listen to all the advice that I can, figure out what this formula is, and then follow it. Now I'm interested in learning how to code, and I'm realizing that program that she did is probably similar to what I would need. So the plan was to spend a few months saving and studying, 3 months of school, 3 months of job hunting, and all of that together put me at a year. Hearing the stories of people who've done exactly what I'm trying to do was very reinforcing. It's not trying to make it to the NBA.
All right, and we're back. You're listening to SG2 on Space, the only weekly space radio show here in Houston, Texas. This is episode number 19. So today we've been interviewing Neil Banerjee, whom I met at last week's I met at the 2019 Human Research Program Conference held by NASA, organized by NASA, held at Galveston. And so Neil's currently a student at the University of Colorado, Boulder, getting a master's in aerospace engineering. Previously, he has done quite a lot of different works, particularly in neuroscience and neurocinematics at the University of Southern California, which is a very interdisciplinary major. He's also interned at a bunch of various companies ranging from media to to science, and now we are talking about his work at Hyperloop Transportation Technologies. So I think I covered a little bit about what the company is trying to do. So Neil, why don't you tell us how you got involved in that and why you were interested, and what role did you play there?
Yeah, so this is a classic, like, a friend of a friend had mentioned it, and it really piqued my interest because this is a really, like, popular idea at the time, where Elon Musk had published this white paper about Hyperloop, and basically he said, I don't have enough time or energy to do this right now, so I'm going to release this idea to the public and see what happens. Mm-hmm. So basically, a couple companies ended up pursuing this idea pretty seriously, and one of those companies is Hyperloop Transportation Technologies. So I met somebody who worked there who just happened to be, like, taking people on to his team at the time. And it's a really interesting company. It's very unlike any other that I've worked for, in that it's a crowdsourced company. So people work there for free, and I shouldn't say for free. They work for stock options. And there are people who generally have full-time jobs elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So these are, like, traditionally people from aerospace or other, like, astronautics companies or whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. And they kind of donate, like, 10 hours out of their week, and they do tasks for this, like, Hyperloop system. Mm-hmm. And since then, the company has grown quite a bit, and there are far more contributors, and now they have probably about 100 full-time workers. But what I did there was I was a materials engineer, and I kind of used a lot of the background I had developed at the Air Force Research Labs. And basically, they have this proprietary material called vibranium, and they wanted me to work on that. Obviously, can't say too much about it, but it's a really cool concept, and I think that their technology is really exciting. They pull from a lot of different places and get in contact with subject matter experts from around the world and kind of pool all that information as it pertains to the Hyperloop and aggregates it and then builds it. So they actually have a test track now in Toulouse, France. And so they should be doing testing there relatively soon.
Wow. So are they, you said you were testing the material called vibranium?
Yeah, so it's kind of based off that, like, it's the material that Captain America's shield is made out of. It's like
that's what I was thinking.
It's like a mythical type material, but the material that we were making is, like, very much real. It just kind of was the inspiration because the idea is for it to be super strong, but also very resilient as, like, a structural material. Mm-hmm. And then, like, on top of that, you know, like most major infrastructure projects of the next decades will have some kind of smart aspect to them. So kind of like this whole idea of structural health monitoring meets Internet of Things. Yeah.
All right. So definitely did not get it from Wakanda. Got it. All right. So, okay. All right, so so you worked on that material, and understandably, this company originally crowdsourced, so everybody worked for free pretty much until it raised enough money, and now it's expanding quite rapidly. So you say they already have one somewhere? Where in France or where?
Yeah, it's in Toulouse, France. So this is a place that, like, is a pretty big aerospace hub in Europe.
Right.
So it's like kind of like, I guess you could say it's like the Denver or the LA of Europe, and they have built a full-scale passenger capsule, and so that's what they'll be testing there.
That's really impressive. So did you use any of your neuroscience and what is it, virtual reality experience in Hyperloop transportation technology?
Not directly. I think it was pretty indicative of this, like I said earlier, like it's like a split between my interests. Like professionally, I had been pursuing mostly aerospace related things, and academically, I had been relating mostly to neuroscience. So I was still at a stage then where they were pretty distinct from one another, and only when I got to Colorado did I start to like really put those things together in a very integrated fashion.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to jump into, understandably, no need to dive into your research, but you are now a research assistant, grad student at University of Colorado Boulder, specifically in bioastronautics group. Once again, that's a very interesting term. What does that mean, and what are you doing?
So bioastronautics is technically defined as the study and support of life in space. And so that doesn't just mean like human life either. There's a lot going on there in terms of all forms of life, like plant life and animal life as it pertains to outer space. So basically, like if we ever want to make it to space on a large scale, you have to understand how it's going to be like for people to live there, both like psychologically, physiologically, and like kind of on a more macro level, how like that society might work. So CU Boulder is more focused on this kind of the empirical study involved with that. As an example, my course curriculum is really interesting and stuff that I've not seen anywhere else, not even close. It's so last semester I took astrodynamics, which is like a pretty standard course for aerospace engineering graduate students to take. But I also took a course called Space Habitat Design, and that was basically a project-based course where we proposed a design for a vehicle that could go to Mars and could land on Mars, and you could do EVAs, then leave Mars and come back to Earth. And that project was obviously very like informational, but the resources available at Colorado are pretty outstanding. There's multiple faculty who are ex-astronauts, and so they were among the people who graded our presentations, actually.
That's really
along
impressive.
With other faculty members who are very, very knowledgeable about life in space. So like the major considerations, obviously, like radiation, like microgravity, reduced atmosphere, all this kind of things.
Okay. Wow. So once again, very okay. So you're basically combining aerospace with I guess biology, and
yeah.
All right. So, and of course, you're throwing in your neuroscience / VR augmented reality / VR experience in there as well. Since from what we talked about at the conference, your current lead research is on creating immersive technology for space habitat design, which I would think goes very well with your coursework as well. So, is there a timeline of when we can read about your research in that?
Yeah, so we're definitely looking to kind of compile the results and publish, or at least start to get some like publication drafts out the door this semester.
Okay.
But yeah, basically as soon as we find some solid results, I think that would be a good time to like share with everybody. But the basic gist of the research is that we're creating these alternative reality environments. And by alternative reality, we mean augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality, or some people call it hybrid reality. And we're creating different tools to like design and evaluate space habitats. because the traditional way that people do it is they just make a physical mock-up, which is really a laborious and very arduous process.
Well, that's how they
and more
have it at
importantly, it's like
NASA.
really expensive sometimes. So, I mean, it's like definitely makes a lot of sense to take advantage of these new technologies that are largely commercialized to streamline the design process.
Yeah, are you guys well, okay, I see. So let me jump into the future questions for you. Given your wide span of experience, where does the future lie after you graduate?
So at the moment, my main interest is this whole idea of getting people into space sustainably and safely. So like something that really like piques my interest is EVA. So that's extravehicular activity, and that's in the past has generally been spacewalks. So people doing maintenance on the International Space Station, they like suit up and they go outside and they fix whatever is wrong or conduct whatever research, and they come back in. Or in the case of the Apollo missions, EVA was like, it was a surface EVA, meaning that they landed and then they went outside. So at the time, this was like a really, really revolutionary thing. And I think like people don't always make the distinction and like realize how crazy of a thing it was to not only get to the moon, but also get out of the spacecraft and like walk on the moon. Like that was pretty crazy. Like in EVA, we always talk about the spacesuit being like the smallest spacecraft ever. It's a spacecraft designed for one.
Yeah,
and,
that makes sense.
So I am really interested in spacesuit research, and I'm very interested in how commercial entities will get into this space. There's already a few players in this space that have been established for a little while, but surely as we see more interest in the foreseeable future of going to Mars and obviously like getting outside and living your life on a different planet or celestial body, like you need this kind of supporting technology. So enabling that is kind of the dream for me at the moment. Obviously these companies like SpaceX, for example, are at the top of the chain, but there will surely be scores of other companies who are doing similar things. So I'm looking forward to that time. I think I definitely got into this field at the exact right time, which is very, very fortunate for me. And I also ended up at this program at the right time. So a lot of things came together that were like really a little bit out of my control. And I'm very thankful for that. So I don't know what the future holds exactly, but I'm definitely preparing myself for a future where people are heading to space in large numbers and living relatively unimpeded lives.
Well, I'm thinking you actually answered my other question as well, but I might as well ask you anyway. So where does the future lie in terms of human habitation in space? Do you think we'll be on the moon and Mars and having permanent settlements in the next 10 or 20 years?
I think it's definitely a possibility. It's hard to say the exact timelines because I'm sure you know that like Elon Musk, for example, has been one to exaggerate timelines a little bit. But the general prospect of having people in space for the long term is something that a lot of research is being done on, and it's definitely in the public eye. So I think there are a lot of forces pushing it forward. And as far as like SpaceX is concerned, I feel like they're doing a very important job in paving the way for this kind of thing to happen. Even if like they mess up a lot of things, or even if they have like, you know, a lot of like obstacles in their path, I think they're really doing trailblazing work. So no matter what criticisms there are of them, I think they at least deserve credit for that. And then definitely I think that the future of spaceflight will be commercial. And NASA has really realized that, I think, recently, which is why they've created this commercial crew program, for example, where government agency and private business go hand in hand, and you can have SpaceX Dragon shuttling people to the International Space Station. I think it's a very representative example of what the potential for collaboration between industry and government.
That's true, and there's of course there's also the Boeing Dream Chaser, as actually
right.
Not
so
the
there's
Boeing,
a Sierra Nevada Dream Chaser and the Boeing Starliner.
CST 100 Starliner. My bad, that was a slip up. So yes. But so there's a number of commercial companies, and of course there's other ones that's planning to go to the moon. From what I see, you're an optimist, but with a tinge of realism as well. So that's good.
Yeah.
Definitely this world needs people like that. So with that, well, for sure, I will count myself as one. So with that, definitely, Neil, I think we've ran out of time here. But truly appreciate you, explaining to our audience all the great works that you've done, as well as explaining a few things that many of us, when we think about space, we don't really think about, including for instance, some of the biological aspects, as well as the emergent technologies of virtual reality, and the fact of using, perception and neurobiology. That's all very interesting. So, any case, to you listeners out there, this has been episode number 19. I've been talking with Neil Banerjee, who is currently a student at University of Colorado Boulder. And of course, you can catch this entire show, this episode, at wearea1.com. That is WEAREA, the number 1.com, as well as facebook.com/action1media, and at facebook.com/the Shen Show, spelled THESHENSHOW. And as always, I will end it by feel free to support me at patreon.com/SG2. And lastly, there is going to be a shift to YouTube in the next month, and I will definitely share that link as we progress along. So eventually, and the reason for this is that, I'm just going to say Facebook tends to remove videos sometime for no reason. I don't know why. So, we're going to shift this program to YouTube, but stay tuned. The Facebook page is still going to be active, so you should be able to, see the videos from there. But the main platform is going to be YouTube in terms of the actual episodes. So with that, I wish everybody a good day, and we'll be back next week. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Neil, for being on the show.
Yep, thanks for having me.
All right, take care. And of course, everyone, look up, because even though I haven't been talking about UFOs lately, you should still do it. Look up. You don't know what you miss.
Peace, it's Brother Atum Ra, and you tuned in to Action One Network.